In this lesson, we're going to focus on Section 3 and Section 4, two of the most critical and often misunderstood parts of the BRBC. Section 3 covers the advisories, addenda, and disclosures attached to this agreement. This is where we confirm exactly what documents the buyer has received, including the broker compensation advisory and any additional forms that become part of the contract. Section 4 addresses compensation to the broker. This is where the agreement explains that commissions are negotiable, how and when a broker earns compensation, what qualifies as broker involvement, how continuation periods work, and how compensation is paid, typically through escrow. Section 3 covers the advisories, addenda, and disclosures attached to this agreement. This is where we confirm exactly what documents the buyer has received, including the broker compensation advisory and any additional forms that become part of the contract. Section 3, Advisories, Addenda, and Disclosures. This section is your attachment checklist. It tells the buyer what extra documents are attached to and become part of this agreement. Step 1, point to the checkbox for Broker Compensation Advisory, BCA. You'll see a box for Broker Compensation Advisory, CAR Form BCA. If you are providing the BCA, which is common, check this box. How to explain to buyers. This advisory explains compensation in plain English, how it works, what's negotiable, and what you may owe depending on the transaction. Step 2, Other Attachments line. 1. There's a checkbox for Other and a blank line. 2. Use this for anything else you're attaching, such as your brokerage addendum, a compensation schedule, buyer preference forms if your broker uses them, any special disclosures required by your brokerage. Remember, if it's attached, list it. If it's not attached, don't list it. This prevents disputes later. Step 3, Best Practice. Confirm the buyer received every attachment. If your brokerage requires initials on attachments, do it. Remember to never check a box for an attachment you didn't actually provide. Section 3 covers the advisories, addenda, and disclosures attached to this agreement. This is where we confirm exactly what documents the buyer has received, including the broker compensation advisory and any additional forms that become part of the contract. Section 4, Compensation to broker. This is where the agreement explains. 1. Compensation is negotiable. 2. When the broker earns compensation. 3. When it's due and how it's paid. 4. How credits work if someone else pays. 5. Disclosure rules about final compensation. Notice at top. It states commissions are not fixed by law and may be negotiated. Explain to the buyer compensation is negotiable. There is no standard rate required by law. This agreement spells out what we've agreed to, so it's clear and transparent. Section 4A, Advisory. This reinforces. 1. Real estate commissions include compensation/fees to broker. 2. They are fully negotiable. This reminds buyers that compensation is not automatic or standardized, it's a negotiated term. Section 4B, Broker Right to Compensation. This is the when the broker is entitled to be paid section. It generally ties the broker's compensation to the representation period, Section 2A1, and property described in Section 2B, property types/locations, and the compensation amount in Section 2E1. Section 4B, 1. Non-exclusive representation, broker involvement. Under non-exclusive, compensation is payable only if there was broker involvement with the property. How to explain to the buyer. If this is non-exclusive, we're paid only for properties we actually helped you with where we were involved. Section 4B, 2. Exclusive representation, buyer acquisition. If exclusive is checked in Section 2A2 and initialed in paragraph 15, broker may be entitled if the buyer acquires property during the period with or without broker involvement, as described. How to explain to buyer the simple and honest way. Exclusive means you're hiring our brokerage as your sole representative during the term. If you buy within the scope and time frame, compensation may be owed even if you found it another way, because the agreement is exclusive. Section 4B, 3. Buyer includes. This expands buyer to include any person/entity acting on buyer's behalf, family member, partner, LLC they control, etc. This prevents a workaround where someone else buys for the buyer to avoid the agreement. Section 4B for definition of broker involvement. This is very important. The form lists examples such as 1. Broker showed property in person. 2. Broker showed property virtually. 3. Broker submitted a signed written offer. 4. Broker performed market analysis or reviewed property-specific disclosures. 5. Broker introduced property to buyer/acted on buyer's behalf. It also clarifies that just sending listings alone may not be involvement without documented action. Best practice. Document your involvement. Notes, emails, showing logs, CMA delivery, disclosure reviews, keep proof in your file. Section 4C, continuation of right to compensation for broker-involved properties. What it means. This is the tail period concept. If the buyer enters into an agreement to acquire a property during the continuation period, the number of days you set in Section 2E3, and the property had broker involvement during the agreement term, then broker may still be entitled to compensation. Critical requirement inside Section 4C2. The broker's right under this continuation section typically applies only if 1. Before the agreement expires or extension ends. 2. Broker delivers the buyer a written notice of the properties for which there was broker involvement, often referenced as CAR Form NBP. If your broker wants to protect the continuation right, you must deliver the written notice of broker-involved properties before expiration. Don't skip that admin step. Section 4D, timing of compensation. It explains when compensation is payable, including 1. Upon completion of a resulting transaction, usually through escrow. 2. If acquisition is prevented by buyer's default, compensation may be addressed as stated. 3. If acquisition is prevented by someone else and buyer recovers damages, compensation may be tied to the recovery, subject to the limits stated. Section 4E, payment through escrow. What it says in practice. 1. Buyer authorizes compensation to broker to be paid from buyer's funds in escrow if needed. 2. Broker may submit the BRBC as escrow instructions regarding payment. This is the mechanism for payment. Escrow handles it, so it's documented, clean, and properly dispersed. Section 4F, accounting if broker also represents seller. If the broker has a signed listing with the seller, dual role, this paragraph explains that. The buyer may not automatically receive a credit for the seller's listing side compensation obligations, as described. Simple explanation. If our brokerage represents the seller too, the seller's obligations under their listing agreement are separate. This clause explains how credits do or do not apply. Section 4G, payments received from others for broker compensation. This section encourages a discussion about 1. Asking the seller to pay some or all of the buyer-broker compensation, where appropriate and lawful. 2. If the seller does not pay, buyer may assign rights to broker as third-party beneficiary to pursue that compensation, as described. 3. Broker is prohibited from receiving more than what's agreed in Section 2E1. Key phrase to teach. No double dipping. The broker can't receive more than what is agreed in paragraph 2E1, even if multiple sources are available. Section 4H, disclosure of payments to broker. This confirms the broker will disclose the final compensation received from anyone other than buyer, independently or through escrow. This is about transparency. The buyer has the right to know what the broker was ultimately paid.